Good evening. The legal voters of the Brattleboro Union High School District Number 6 School District, comprising the voters of the towns of Brattleboro, Dummerston, Guilford, and Putney, were notified and warned to meet at the BUHS District Number 6 Gymnasium on Wednesday, June 12, 2019 at 7 p.m. to conduct the business included in the warning. I declare the meeting hereby convened at 7:03 p.m. If you'd all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The purpose of this meeting tonight is to vote on Articles 1 and 2 and to conduct any other business that may legally come before the meeting this evening. A copy of the warning and articles were available on the front. They still are available in the yellow paper as you signed in with your town clerk this evening. The town clerks for your respective towns and or their assistants will serve as ballot tellers and vote counters. Captain Mark Anderson of the Windham County Sheriff's Department will serve as our Sergeant at Arms. I'm Steve Brown, and I'm still your moderator. I'd like to introduce Lyle Holliday to make introductions of the board and other officials.
Good evening. Tonight we have as board members, I'll start at the far end, Katie Everest from Brattleboro. Who's next? Rick Mills from Dummerston. Ann Beekman from Putney. Russ Janis from Brattleboro. Sean Murphy from Guilford. Ricky Davidson from Brattleboro. Robert Woodworth, his name is Woody to me, from Brattleboro. Frank Rucker, business administrator, and to my left, Barb Nowakowski.
Yes, please.
I'd also like to introduce the administrators for BU6. We have Raymond Dunn from the Windham Regional Career Center, Keith Lyman from Brattleboro Area Middle School, Steve Perrin, principal of Brattleboro Union High School, Mary Kaufman, assistant principal, Brattleboro Union High School, and Kate Margaitis, assistant principal, Brattleboro Union High School.
The BCTV production crew is recording the meeting for future viewing. Our sound system is provided by Rich Mayer of Be Heard Sound. Microphone passers this evening are Myra Macy. Myra, where are you? Over there. Hello, Myra. And Gabe French to your right. Voting procedures this evening. Those persons desiring to participate in any district meeting held at the Brattleboro Union High School Gymnasium must enter by the main entrance from the parking lot. All those desiring to vote must register with his or her clerk at the tables near the entrance. Upon registering, if found qualified, each voter will be given a colored card, which is to be raised when the voter wishes to have his or her vote counted. All voters must be seated in 4 reserved sections on the gymnasium floor or in the reserved sections of the bleachers. All other persons, except police, fire officials, or technical staff, shall be seated in the areas designated for observers and visitors. Voting in all matters shall be by voice, by division of the voters, or by paper ballots. A division shall be had at the discretion of the moderator or upon demand of 6 or more voters. A vote by paper ballot shall be had upon demand of 7 or more voters. Voters who have spoken at least once on the question shall not again be entitled to the floor to the exclusion of to another who has yet spoken without leave of the voters. To gain the floor, each voter shall rise, address the chair, give his or her name and town of residence. Debate shall be limited to 5 minutes per person speaking for the first time on any article. Special committees of the voters may be established by the voters, but their existence shall be continued only from year to year, July 1st through June 30th, unless renewed by the next annual meeting and subsequent meetings thereafter. On the motion of any voter, any meeting may resolve into a committee of the whole on any pending question. All parliamentary procedures and rulings shall be governed by Robert's Rules of Order, current edition, except as modified by these rules, as amended by Title 16, Section 706 of the Vermont Statutes annotated. And I should remind folks that bathrooms are to your left in the back, and there's signage directing you to that location, should the need arise. Article 1, here we go. We will now take up Article 1. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator, to the extent that the law requires the school district to vote a Brattleboro Union High School District Number 6 budget at this meeting, the article is as follows. I move that the voters of the school district authorize the school board to expend $25,221,000, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $18,372 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 2.6% higher than spending in the current year. In the event that no school district budget is required to be voted at this meeting, this article shall be null and void. And if this is seconded, I'd like to speak to the article.
Yes, sir. Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I will read the motion. To the extent that the law requires a school district to vote on a Brattleboro Union High School District Number 6 budget at this meeting, the article is as follows. It's been moved that the voters of the school district authorize the school board to expend $25,221,000, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that the proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $18,372 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 2.6% higher than spending for the current year. In the event that no school district budget is required to be voted on at the meeting, the article shall be null and void. Mr. Woodworth.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Well, I'm going to refer to some points that are in this yellow book, which I'm sure must have been passed out in the back. And I just want to start back at when we started with this budget. I'll go quickly through the kind of the history. It's been several months we've been involved with this budget. As we do every year in October, we meet with the administrators and give them some direction as what we'd like to see in an overall budget. And for about the last 10 years at least, we have said level service and as close as possible to level funding. And we said that again this year. And they responded with what we think is a very responsible budget that is level service basically. The funding amount is up a little bit, but we'll go through quickly and explain that. This budget has been approved by the BUHS District 6 Board a couple of months ago, and we will hope it'll be accepted as part of the new school district board. So, as mentioned in the article, $25,221,000. I'd like to just set a little bit of a framework for the individual units, the high school, the BAMS, Career Center, and also what we call district-wide, which are services that go across the entire group, such as custodial services, nursing services, and those that affect all three units. So just to set the stage, the census prediction for the number of students that we'll have next year is actually up. As most of you know, probably over the last few years, the trend has been slightly smaller in a lot of schools and to an extent here. For this coming year, based on who we know is coming from the elementary schools, the surrounding towns, and our best estimate, BAMS we predict to be from a current of 285 to about 315 students. BUHS is somewhere in just over 800 now, 810 probably, varies from day to day, and their projection there is 840. The Career Center has a lot of part-time students, so it's kind of hard to measure that exactly, but we're predicting that that will be fairly stable in terms of student census. So basically we have as many or more customers to serve. One thread that's woven through most of this is that however many students we have more and more students each year that need extra help. And you'll see when I tell you the 2 or 3 staff changes here that most of those are geared towards working with students that need extra help. So the significant drivers of the increase are contract wages, for certain, a huge percentage of our total expenditures in salaries and benefits. Health insurance was up 10% approximately. And those are the two biggest drivers of our overall budget. Staffing changes in the senior high. We were proposing to reinstate the Dean of Students position. And we've had that in the past, and now we have 2 assistant principals. There's an awful lot of work to be done in that area, and again, a lot of it with students who need extra help and our referrals, as we call them. In the senior high, we also are proposing to add a full-time clinician, and this is a position that will be offset by Medicaid funding. Again, students that need extra help. In BAMS, we are proposing a full-time academic support person, and this is partially a grant coverage. And again, students, there's so many students that need some extra help, and that's why we propose that position. Also, the only other thing in BAMS that's sizable is replacing some of the initial Chromebooks. Most everybody, I believe, has those now, but it's time to replace the first round. So those are what I would call significant changes. If you look at the whole number, it's not a huge amount, but they are changes that we're proposing. So in terms of looking at the individual, if you look on page 7 of your yellow package there, it's broken down into the main programs, and the first category is district-wide, and that is basically level. We are only within $6,000 of last year's budget. Part of that, we're being aided by the fact that debt service has been reduced. The big project is a few years away from retiring its debt service, but the numbers are getting a little bit smaller. That works in our favor. Part of a big part actually of the district-wide budget is our capital plan. And I'd like to, before I move on to the other units, just move down towards the bottom half of the page. And you can see the third number from the bottom on the right, in the right-hand column, $350,000. That's our capital plan. And that's on page 17 and 19 of the packet if you'd like to look that over. But I'll just give you the key points to that. $350,000. Of that, $120,000 is for improvements in the hot water distribution system. We need some flooring work in BAMS, $65,000. Every year we do a little bit of roof work. We have a huge volume of acres of roof here, so we put $20,000 in there and $20,000 for the parking lots. And then we also included $125,000 towards a loan for our proposed Natowich Field improvements. So that's where we come up with $350,000. Now that there are other capital expenditures, capital type expenditures in the district-wide budget, but they're ongoing and paid out of operations. So district-wide, pretty level. Senior high is up 5.4%. As mentioned, there's a couple of staff positions there, but a good share of that is going to be in the negotiated salaries and benefits. And the district-wide, by the way, was on page 15 and 16, and the senior high we're talking about now is on page 12 and 13. And I realize I'm moving pretty fast through these pages. In the past, I've never had the same packet that everybody else did, and I got everybody confused reading page numbers that they didn't have. But for your reference, page 12 and 13, senior high. 5.4% up, for $428,000 increase. BAMS, grades 7 and 8, is about the same percentage up, 5.6%. Page 11 and 12 has the BAMS budget, and you can see what individual categories are affected there. The Career Center is level funded, basically 0.6%. That's on page 13 and 14. Part of the Career Center is obviously a huge part of it is offset by tuition, and I skipped that part up on the senior high. It shows tuition to the Career Center. That's a big part of we have a lot of BUHS kids that go to the Career Center. So overall, the Career Center pretty level in funding, and if you put it all together, that's where you come up with a 2.6% $25,221,000, and that's our proposal for your viewing and consideration. And if interest in the revenue part of it, how it matches up, I would suggest maybe you inquire of Mr. Rucker here, but I don't have the right to yield my time because I've already gone over.
Very good. Any other debate on the motion? Any debate on the motion? Are you ready to call the vote? And one more time, I'll read the motion. The motion is that to the extent that the law requires the school district to vote the Brattleboro Union High School District Number 6 budget at this meeting, the article is as follows. The voters of the school district authorize the school board to expand $25,221,000, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It's estimated that the proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $18,372 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 2.6 higher than spending for the current year. In the event that no school district budget is required to be voted at this meeting, this article shall be null and void. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You have passed Article 1. We're halfway done. Article number 2. I understand Ricky Davidson has a motion.
Yes, Mr. Moderator. I move that the voters of the school district authorize the school board to borrow up to $750,000, not to exceed 5 years, for the purpose of necessary capital improvements to the recreational field. I'd like to speak to that if it's seconded.
Is there a second on the motion? Second. The motion's been moved and seconded that the voters of the school district authorize the school board to borrow up to $750,000, not to exceed 5 years, for the purpose of necessary capital improvements to the recreational field. Mr. Davidson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. In the yellow booklet that you received in the back, it's page 6. There's a nice one-page write-up that the administration put together for us here, the athletic department as well as the facilities department, to talk about this. And we, as a board, I wanted to just emphasize, have been communicating and talking about this with different folks within the school and outside the school since 2002. So this is not just we decided this year to do this. This has been a long-term conversation that we've been having. And really it came up in relation to the need for field space continues to grow. Even since 2002, we have expanded the number of sports that we offer. Part of that is stuff we have to offer. Part of that is stuff that we have the opportunity to offer. And the field space usage is a problem because we're borrowing fields from other places and using fields other places, but it's not always the most convenient. This improvement on the Natowich field would increase playability on that field and allow more sports to have opportunities to take place right here on our campus. The other thing I want to say about that before I open up to questions, and I'm sure the administration can help if we need answer questions, is that we are at a point now with Natowich Field that we're going to need to put a significant amount of money in it just to get what we have now. And that was a real turning point for me as an individual voter, is that just to put grass back down on that field and have it be a good playable field again, we would need to put in a significant amount of money. So going the extra steps to make these further improvements to get us way more playable time for our student athletes and way more use for gym classes and things like that made sense to me. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate on the motion? Further debate? If you could just hold on for 1 second. Gabe's got that mic coming to you. Thank you. If you could please state your name and your town.
Henry Zucchini, Brattleboro.
Thank you.
So I'm speaking both as a teacher and as a parent and as a citizen of Brattleboro. I'm deeply opposed to this proposal. I think there's a number of reasons to be opposed to it. These fields, and they're fairly well documented, have toxic chemicals in them. They're made of ground up tires that are full of carcinogens and are highly toxic. The one-time, I'm a little questioning the one-time expense of $750,000 because the estimates are $1 million, so I want to know where the extra $250 is coming from. I'd be curious about that. And if you read the fine print, in 5 or 10 years, you're going to need to replace a field at $500,000. So that means in a very short amount of time, $1 million expense is then $1.5 million. And this is every 10 years it will need to be replaced. So there's a toxicity issue, there's an expenditure issue, which is way above what's being stated here, I think, in the long run. The other thing that concerns me greatly is, as a teacher in the school, and I'm glad to hear you, Woody, talking about the need for support staff and funding, but I, as a teacher in the high school, feel as though there's a lot of need for more support staff because of the increased needs of our students. And I think that there's basically a pot of money, and you can say it's capital funds, you can say whatever you want about it, but the reality is, I, as a high school teacher, do not feel as though, with the cut in paraeducators in classrooms, for example, that there is enough support in the high school right now to deal with the amount of learning needs that we currently have. And so taking $1 million on a field that will pull away from things that are desperately needed in the classroom, in my opinion, is not a helpful thing to propose at this time. There are lots of other solutions to this, including resodding the field, putting lights up at the tick field, to add that as another space for students to play at. And so I would highly encourage people to vote against this motion. Thank you.
Further debate on the motion. Are you ready to call the question? Yes.
Sure. Well, I can address some of those points.
If you could just please state your name and your town.
Sure. Chris Sawyer, the athletic director at the high school. And the first thing that you brought up was, as a parent, I also have concerns about cancer and crumb rubber and everything we heard. And, several years ago, the stories came out about women soccer players and goalies in California. And that gives a lot of pause, especially in my position. It's something I really looked into and studied. But as we learn about the sciences and we take a look at the new generations of fields, there have been several studies. There's a packet in the back that has some of these studies, but most recently, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Departments of Health and Environment in New York City, Connecticut, and California, and other private universities have all validated that there is no health authorities have determined that there's no scientific evidence supporting any connection between turf fields and cancer. So that's one thing we really did take a look at. I have a letter that the Burn Burton headmaster issued to their school and their staff when they got a field, and it said in part, there have been various reports in the media regarding the safety of turf fields, particularly those with crumb rubber infill, and some of our students have been asking questions about the safety of the field. 2 important studies were recently done, one by the state of Massachusetts and the other by the state of Connecticut. Again, in both cases, after comprehensive review, the health authorities have determined that there's no scientific evidence. Highlights included the risk of airborne contamination is minimal, cancer links are anecdotal, not scientific, there's fewer bacteria detected on artificial turf, though there are more skin abrasions observed, and the background levels of airborne chemicals from automobiles and heating sources are much more significant sources of airborne carcinogens. They also cited Williams College and Middlebury College as being 2 very environmentally sound and minded colleges that both have multiple synthetic turf fields at their schools, and they support, the fields. So I would speak to that about the health. And again, I don't take that lightly. It is a concern, but I think, again, these are 3rd generation fields with different components, and safety is very important. As far as some of the points about other options, we could take a look at Sawyer Field over by Vaudbec, but and maybe other people can speak to it, but we cannot put lights over there because of permitting, how close the fields are to the highway. So it is something we have taken a look at before. And I think what Mr. Davidson might have alluded to, costs about resodding turf fields, is we really can't resod, well, we can resod Nantwich Field, but it would cost about $300,000 to $400,000. And many schools in this state have recently resodded fields and had failing fields. For instance, Rutland High School resodded their field, and it cost about $350,000. A year later, they had to rip it up because it wouldn't drain, and they had to put a synthetic turf field in. Middlebury High School put in a field it didn't take. In fact, when we put in the field over at Sawyer Field, it took about 10 years before it became flexible. It was so compacted for about 10 years that it really wasn't a quality field. So yes, we could resod it, but it would cost a lot of money. There's no guarantee that it would work. And then we also don't gain anything by doing that because already our fields are overused. So studies show that a natural turf field could be used up to 200 hours a year. And for high impact sports such as football and lacrosse, we could probably play 10 to 15 games on that field per year, and that's what we do. So we could resod it and continue doing what we're doing and have a field for another 30 years, but we wouldn't be able to add soccer to that use. We wouldn't be able to add field hockey to its use, so we wouldn't be gaining anything for its money. So when we're speaking about cost effectiveness, synthetic field really does make the most sense. And as far as the money, and I'm not going to speak to that, but it is not an inexpensive thing, but I will say that the VPA the last couple of years has recently started to stress that athletics should be considered co-curricular. So when we did this building project in 2002, 2003, it was a fairly expensive product, but it was necessary because it really supported our students and our teachers in helping the education of our students. But those fields are also a classroom for our students and coaches. So if we want to provide them the positive environment and learning in our athletic program, it can be considered a necessary thing. Thank you.
Before we go to Kate O'Connor, I saw her hand. I wanted to give the administration. I wanted to give the administration of the board an opportunity to answer the question about the money to fund the field. I neglected to offer you folks an opportunity.
Sure. As Mr. Woodworth had pointed out, if we look at our capital plan on the back of the report, starts on page 17. The capital plan identifies major components of our facility and our campus, with known useful life estimates. So page 17 starts with what might be very familiar to most folks, the heating systems, air handling, and so on. When we go to the second page, toward the bottom of page 18, is where you see the provisions for funding for the Natowich field. And in fiscal year 20, we start with a series of payments, estimated payments for turf. So, as I say, fiscal year 20, kind of in the middle of the document. There's actually 6 payments there, and the intent is for planning and the initial work through design and bid process that would provide for, you can see, potentially depending on the timing of the project, 2 years of $125,000 each, so that's the $250,000, and then there is, as we go out to 2026, there would be enough resources there for the entire cost of the project. But I would like to also point out that the school district does have a reserve fund. There is currently as you see on page 19, $726,000 in that reserve fund, and that's why the wording is up to $750,000. It seems, based on our history at Brattleboro Union High School of attracting more students from the broader region, that our tuition revenue has been creating some surpluses. We can't count on that, but if the pattern continues, the expectation is I would not be surprised to see future surpluses actually avoid borrowing a significant amount. So I hope that addresses your question.
Ms. O'Connor? The floor is yours. Thank you for your patience.
Frank may have answered this, but he may not have, so I apologize. Because I was looking at the capital budget again on page 18 and the $125,000 over 6 years. And my question is, if the bond does not go through, is the intent to use the money out of the reserve fund to pay for this? And if the amount that you're thinking is between $1 million and $1.25 million, where does the other money come from? And can I have a third question? What would the bond payments or the bond payments be on a $750,000 loan?
This is, I never put down. This is not what you would call a normal bond payment. This is authorization to borrow, but there is funds available at our discretion to use within the other part of our capital plan that I referred to. This comes out of operations, so and that's where some of the surplus comes into play too. Certainly the amount you're approving is not the total, and it would be, we've had estimates from $934,000 up to $1 million plus, so there would be a need for a little more funding, but we feel very comfortable that based on our projected revenues and potential surplus, we will be able to cover that. And as actually the actual details, if I don't know if Frank you want to add something to that? He's the money man.
So in addition to the capital plan that we've looked at, to address your question about maybe contingencies, maybe a variance in a bid process, we can also look at our general reserve fund. So if we go back to page 7, Page 7, that again Mr. Woodworth gave us a thorough overview of. The top section is the proposed spending by the various schools within Brattleboro Union High School District number 6. The lower section of that page is the reserves. And you can see the bottom line, a projected FY20 end fund balance on the first column of data there on the bottom, $2,331,000. So that is a reserve at this point that was set up years ago, and under the discretion of the school board. So not sure what that is, but so there are ample resources to deal with contingencies. Maybe one other comment is, as Mr. Woodworth pointed out, this is not a bond vote. The statutes authorize the electorate, you folks, to give the school board the authority to borrow if the term is less than 5 years from a floor vote here, as opposed to bond. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so interest rates have been declining, as you know, actually quite a bit in the last month. As you probably know, there's been a lot of speculation that will continue. 750,000 divided by 5 years is 150,000 a year. So adding a little bit of interest, it would be higher than that, but we can structure that loan so that, first of all, we would hope that we would use the reserves as presented to essentially pay the contractor and avoid borrowing. And then when we do finish the bid process, I would expect the loan payment to be no more than $150,000, based on structuring it so that it matures earlier based on, as we said, either the use of these reserves that are available or a potential future surplus.
Further debate on the motion.
Hi, I'm here representing Coach Murphy, who's the band.
If you could just please state your name.
My name
and
is
your town.
Tara Sullivan.
Thank you.
And my husband started coaching the BAMS lacrosse team this year, and he's out of town, but he asked us to come and represent him and let you know that it was really hard to find field space for the BAMS lacrosse team this year. They roamed around looking for space and used what they could find. And also we are here to advocate for the field because it's a safer material and softer for kids, and that hasn't come up yet, so I want to mention that. We have a child with arthritis, and running on this kind of field as opposed to grass is just so much more. It's just a more accessible field for more kids. Thank you.
Further debate on the motion. And again, the motion is that it's been moved that the voters of the school district authorize the school board to borrow up to $750,000, not to exceed 5 years, for the purpose of necessary capital improvements to the recreational field. Any further debate? Are you ready to call the question? Mr. Zucchini.
Henry Zucchini, Brattleboro. Just to reiterate, though, based on what Mr. Sawyer said, we can't deceive ourselves that whether or not the studies prove this fields cause cancer, that the materials being put into the field are cancer causing. That's unequivocal. They're made of recycled tires for the most part, and they have known carcinogens in them. So let's just be clear on that. Whether it causes cancer or not, those materials will be in the field from when they're put in till when they're taken out. You still have not addressed the fact that in a number of years, fairly short, a decade, you'll need to replace the field at $500,000. Who knows what the school's cost will be at that point. What you said, Mr. Rucker, is what I feared, is that you're taking out of reserve funds, which are desperately needed funds, in my opinion, to increase the number of support staff in the high school, to support high school teachers who are basically working solo in rooms with no other adults to help them. And it's been drastically reduced in the last 5 years, which makes our jobs as high school teachers, I can't speak to the other schools because I don't work there, but our jobs as high school teachers even more tenuous and difficult. And so I can't imagine spending that money on fields, which we already have and we can improve. To me, that is obviously clearly money that's being taken away from support in the schools. The other thing that was not mentioned is these fields are incredibly hot. It was mentioned that they would, in the materials, that there'd be more summer sports being played in the fields. The fields are extraordinarily hot. They're much, much warmer than a regular grass field, 10, 15, 20, 30 degrees hotter. And so students who have played in these fields report that it's almost unbearable in the middle of the summer to play in these types of fields. So I would encourage people to vote down this motion.
Further debate on the motion? Seeing none, are you ready to call the question? And I'll read the motion one last time. It's been moved that the voters of the school district authorize the school board to borrow up to $750,000, not to exceed 5 years, for the purpose of necessary capital improvements to the recreational field. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Article 2 is passed. We move next to Article 3, new business. I'd ask Superintendent Holliday to please take the floor.
Thank you. Not certain what will happen to us on June 30th, if we will be dissolved as individual town school districts and BU6, or if we will become a unified merged district. But I would like to take this opportunity to thank board members, and I will recognize this evening Ricky Davidson in recognition and appreciation of your dedication and service to the students and families of the Brattleboro Union High School District Number 6 during 17 years of service as school board director, board vice chair, and board chair. So thank you, Ricky.
will hand the floor to Ricky Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Before I do some official things I want to do, I just want to say that, taking my prerogative, I guess, as board chair for the last time, that in the 17 years that I've been part of this school as a board member, I've been very proud of everybody I've served with on this board, from back when it was a 17-member board to now an 8-member board. And we worked with some of the best administrators and educators that I've ever seen in my life. And this is from somebody who went to 7 high schools, so I know what high schools are, having gone to 7 of them. So all the administrators, teachers, really dedicated people, and board members. So to recognize some board members tonight, starting with Ann Beekman for 3 years of service to the BUHS number 6 board. Thank you. And Katie Everest for 2 years of service to the BUHS board. And for 8 years of service to this board, and I got to say 8 years of service to the Brattleboro Town Board, Rush Janis. And sort of the newbie to the group, for 1 year of service to the BUHS board, Rick Mills. And for 16 years of service to the BUHS board, Sean Murphy. And the last one for tonight, for 15 years of service to the BUHS board as a school director, board vice chair, and board chair, Bob Woodworth. But before we do the applause thing, hang on a quick second. Bob was chair before I was, and when he got elected this last time for his last 3-year stint on the board, he said, I want to do it one more time, but I don't want to be chair anymore, and just so you know, I'm nominating you. And I was vice chair, and I said, I'm happy to step up into that role as long as we have the same agreement. And he said, okay. So I nominated him as my vice chair. But I was never allowed to be absent, just like he was never allowed to be absent, so I didn't have to do anything as vice chair. But thank you very much for 15 years of service, Bob.
Couple announcements before we recognize any other new business. Do we have the numbers from the town clerk for tonight's meeting? So while those are coming up, I've been asked to remind people that the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District, it's a mouthful, that meeting will take place on June 25th, 2019 at 7 p.m. right here. That's the meeting to take care of the budget for the fiscal year. Any other new business? All right, here are tonight's numbers. The town of Brattleboro, out of 9,326 registered voters, we had 41 people in attendance for 0.44% of the electorate. Dummerston, out of 1,613 voters, 14 were in attendance for 0.87% of the electorate. And you folks had more per capita than any other town, so congratulations, Dummerston. Guilford, out of 1,733 voters, had 6 in attendance for 0.35%. Putney, out of 1,842 voters, also had 6 for 0.33%. The totals, out of 14,514 registered voters, there were 67 people in attendance for 0.46% of the voting population. Any other new business? Seeing none, I will hear a motion to adjourn. And I was going to bet that Ruth Barton has that motion. Ms. Barton.
There being no further business to conduct, I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second on the motion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is adjourned. Thank you. It is 7:47.